Vasyl Ivanchuk has made an incredible comeback in this match. He was 3-0 down to Alireza, but he fought back strongly, and now he sets up this really tense and exciting final 10th game. He's 5-4 down, but if he wins this one, he levels the match, he takes us to a decider. So the full match details are below. Let's get into this. Alireza kicked off with pawn to d4. So Chucky's under pressure, he's got the black pieces, he goes knight to f6, and now Alireza doesn't go for this bishop g5 Trompovsky stuff. We saw that earlier in the match. He goes pawn c4. So e6 from Chucky, and now if Alireza goes knight c3, we could be heading for a Nimzo-Indian with bishop b4. So knight f3 came from Alireza, he avoids that, and now Chucky goes pawn b6, going for these so-called Queen's Indian lines. And now g3 was played by Alireza, the approved move here. There are other ways to play, a3. And now bishop a6 came, may look a bit weird. Bishop b7 is also very possible, of course, but this one pressures the c4 pawn. Ask white whether they want to go queen c2, queen a4, or pawn b3, which is the main line. And now bishop to b4 check was played by Chucky. This is one of the main moves, and after the bishop blocked here, it simply dropped back, losing a tempo. So what's going on with this? Well, the idea is that the white bishop now will have to spend a tempo later on, coming to f4 or g5, improving itself, because after bishop to g2, castles and knight c3, we can see that this bishop is a bit badly placed, staring at its own knight, blocking the d file from the queen or other heavy pieces, so it will always have to improve at some point. Now we had pawn d5, the principled strike in the centre. There's a lot of pressure on c4 here, so we had captures on d5, the pawn recaptured, castles from white, and now the bishop dropped back to b7. So it's done its job here, pressuring the c4 pawn. Now it comes back here, and this e4 square is a key battleground now for the rest of the middle game. So we had queen to c2 now from Alireza, and now knight to a6. It might look slightly strange to put that knight on the edge, but actually it does have some good access to these dark squares, say if c5 ever came. And also if you go c6 to bolster the pawn here, which we saw later, the knight can come back round via c7, hit these light squares, and in the meantime it doesn't block the queen by sitting on, say, d7. Alireza now brought his rook to the d file, so he's anticipating a c5 potentially, discouraging that move from black. And now there are different moves for black here. You could go rook e8 or knight e4. Chucky goes queen c8, so he's looking to activate to this e6 square, and knight h4 from Alireza, preparing to come in here, was then met by pawn g6. And so bishop g5 now came, improving the bishop, putting some pressure on these new dark squared weaknesses. The rook came to e8 defending the bishop, and now rook a to c1 was played, hitting this half open file, and black wants to go bishop to a3 now, but you can't do it just yet or you lose your knight on f6. So the queen completes the maneuver, also defends the knight. Now the best move for white would have actually been queen to b2. You stop bishop a3, and although it might look slightly passive here, you're preparing pawn a3, pawn b4 in the future, playing against this knight, playing against c5. But what Alireza did here was go bishop to f3. And this just isn't good because it blocks the retreat of the knight here, which might like to come back and then hit e5, and also allows bishop a3, which Chucky duly played. So the rook now has to go away. It comes all the way over to a1, and the knight hit e4 now, coming into that nice outpost square. Black is now better. Now the best here for Alireza would have actually been to capture that knight, because after, say, the pawn recaptures here, then you can kick on with d5. The position should be roughly level. Black has a little bit of pressure, I would say, but white's getting some pressure through the centre here with this pawn, blocking out the bishop for the time being. But what Alireza did here was play bishop to d2. So he comes away from the attack here on the g5 square, but it looks very passive now. It blocks the rook. The knight can come into b4. Now first Chucky started with queen to c6, threatening knight b4. So this forced Alireza's hand. He took on e4 here, and Chucky actually recaptures with the rook. You can't take back, of course, or you lose your queen on c2 here. So instead, Alireza wants to move this bishop out the way. It should really come to f4 here. That's a bit more active. But he goes to e1. He wants to keep an eye on the knight. And now with knight b4, he's also freed up the d2 square for the queen. So instead, Chucky doubled the rooks on the e-file. Now Alireza went queen to d3. He wants to bring it over to f3 here. And now the rook has to retreat, or it really will be taken by the knight now. And Alireza wants to bring this knight on the rim back into the game at this point. If he comes to f3, he blocks the queen coming there. That's where he wants to put his queen after knight b4. So instead he goes knight g2, a great move, heading for this f4 square as well, where it'll hit these points. But now Chucky did have an opportunity to win a pawn. He could have gone bishop to b2. After you move the rook, you can simply pick up here, the queens could come off, the rook crashes through, black is doing very well. But he missed to play like this. What he played wasn't a bad move, he dropped the bishop back, but it does give white a few opportunities now. So the rook came to the c-file, queen back to d7, the queen came to f3 here, and now pawn c6 just held this one in the centre for the moment, freed up this square for the knight. So bishop's d2 was played by Alireza. He wants to activate this one back in the game. The bishop now came back to a3. It nudged the rook off the half open file and then came back to f8 here. So bishop f4 from Alireza. He brings that back into the game. And now rook to f6 was a very interesting move by Chucky. So he's preparing g5, winning a piece. So Alireza goes h4. He shuts down on that idea. The knight came back to c7, and now finally white gets this e4 break. Is white going to start taking over the game, bringing the knight in, coming in on these dark squares here? Well, bishop e5 now came from Alireza, and he really is threatening this one. It's getting very dangerous. So Chucky goes knight d5, covering those squares. They're both down to about 30 seconds now. It's getting very tense on the clock. And now this knight is a key defender, so Alireza wants to remove it. But the best way to do this was knight to f4. If you capture here, the queen recaptures. Black is still a little better, but you haven't ruined the pawn structure when you play like this. What Alireza did was go knight to e3, and this is a mistake because Chucky captures, and now the queen can't take, or there's too many problems down the e-file. Pawn f6 is an excellent follow-up. So Alireza took with the pawn here, but now the bishop can come to e7. It could have come to g7, but basically you cover this f6 square, and white is really struggling. So queen f4 was played, coming off this diagonal, prophylaxis against that bishop, and c5. And now Chucky could have actually won the game here on the spot with pawn to f6, because this bishop is trapped. Say you take this one with check, well, the bishop can simply recapture. After bishop takes, you've got rook to f8. And this rook f8 theme is just a killer, no matter how you take that f6 pawn. But what Chucky did in the time pressure was go pawn f5 instead. Still a good move. It kicks this knight away. Knight g5 was best here, but it came back to c3, and now c5 is an excellent move from Chucky. He opens up that deadly light squared bishop. He wants queen c6, mating the king here. So Alireza took, and now his plan after queen c6 was to plant the knight on the d5 square, but this is a very shaky defense. The bishop simply captured on c5, and there's so many problems now within the white position. So this bishop's attacked. He drops it back to a1, but now the rook comes crashing through on e3. You can't take with the knight, or you're simply getting mated here with queen to g2. That knight's actually pinned here, as we can see. So instead, Alireza tried king to h2. We had rook e2 check, king h3, and now the queen just sidestepped to e6 here. There's very little that white can do. Alireza went queen c4, coming onto this diagonal, but it's actually a blunder. The position was lost anyway. Simply f4 check came. The king was attacked, g4 blocked it, but now it's mate in 6. Can you find it? Here Chucky played the very simple combination. Bishop takes on d5. the queen recaptured, the queen took back here, and here Alireza resigned the position. If you take back with the rook, then this is simply mate. So Chucky fights back. He sets up a tie break. Do tune in for that next one to see what happens. If you want to see the Magnus Alireza playlist, click here, and subscribe to the channel, see below. Thanks for watching, see you soon.